the question of why it's important to give students a voice is interesting for me, because I would say it's in the policies. All of the international policies and national ones that we see actually say in consultation with the students. So it would be nice to do what we're supposed to be doing. But my heart tells me more than just that. It basically says, because it's best practice in the way that children are more likely to achieve success if they're involved in the process. And I don't know, Susan, if you've got another way of explaining it, but for me, I know through my experience, children do better when they've had a say in what they're doing. And now we just want to prove that they can have a say. I don't know, Susan, what do you think your experience
I
is?
think that is the important part, is that we know that they should have a say. Everything tells us that they should have a say, but the way that they get the opportunity to do that is often not clear to people, and whether or not, yes, they do get that opportunity. Sometimes there's that caveat of they should have a say if they can. And I think what you're looking at, showing is they can, not just they should, but they can.
I think we can get a little bit complacent on the efforts we make into communicating with our students. And for me, that was one of those experiences where, as a disability advocate, I go into lots of schools and the first thing I say is, well, have you asked them what they wanted? And the teacher's like, but they're nonverbal. So what are some nonverbal ways you can do with it? So, when we were creative and we came up with some ways, it was interesting to me that we only had 14 participants in our research, but the fact that we got 740 responses, we sort of proved that if you are creative with the way you communicate, you can definitely get a lot of responses from them and they can have a say. So it was really cool for me to see that. And that's why I
Yeah.
kind of like the podcast, because it's another way of communicating the information.
And it's certainly a different type of research that you have done, and leading into the research, thinking about how do you conduct this, and you're wanting genuine voices as well. You're not wanting to behave. Well, I guess that comes back into the ethics, as it were, of the research. Is how do you do this in such a way that you are getting genuine voices, that you are not putting words into children's mouths, which then defeats the whole purpose of actually doing the research. And because you've brought that play-based approach to it, was also really interesting. Like, for me, thinking about the range of research that I've been involved in over the years, this was a very different piece of research, and I had to get my head around, how does this really work? You work within certain parameters, as it were. And I think, yes, what you've really shown is the value of looking at research creatively as well. And yeah, thinking outside of your standard parameters for research. It's not just about interviews, or if even in a sense, I mean, you've got your participant voices, but the way you've elicited those voices has been really interesting and really effective.
What I found, Susan, was we aim to not do direct questioning to the children. We know that working with children with autism, that direct questioning sometimes isn't the best way of communicating with them. But what we found was doing these creative ways with them and eliciting these responses, they then volunteered information more directly because they'd been given an opportunity to do it how they wanted it first, and then they felt comfortable enough to then share that information. So I could ask direct questions, and we got more out of them that way, which, I never would have. I didn't anticipate that. So some of those unanticipated things probably can have an impact in the classroom in the sense that teachers can have a look at, hang on, maybe if you do give them a way of easing in, have some of these play-based ways, you might actually build that relationship. If we do these activities at the beginning of the year, build that relationship, and then they start to feel more comfortable with being able to have a direct conversation with you or direct communication. So I think that's important too, the process of it, not necessarily just the results. I mean, the results are amazing, but the process for me has been really interesting. It's confirms what we probably knew, that they can and they want to have a say. But what they said, movement and breaks was the top choice for them. And I thought that was really interesting because they were talking not just about, going outside and having a break. It wasn't just about that. It was about the chance to move around the classroom. So if they feel like standing up or sitting down or sitting on the floor or, walking around, they can still complete their learning, but they just need that physical movement. And it's, the health and phys ed teacher in me gave a little happy dance when because, I've already known that movement is an important part. But, so the next closest, so I think it was 31.5% said movement and breaks, just being able to do a job or even get a hug. That was amazing. But then the second category was the seating in the classroom and the desks. So things like having a nice chair to sit on, being able to move away from a group desk, but not just having a seat on their own. Things like that is pretty powerful for them to say. And things that we do as standard, like fidget spinners, they were like fourth or fifth on the list. So that I think has also been really interesting for me because people think, oh, we've got a child with autism or we've got a child with ADHD. Let's give them a fidget spinner when they sit on the mat. And it was actually probably not even, a consideration for half of them.
Yeah, that diversity as well. I mean, we know this, we talk about this, Delyse, you and I talk about this as well. It's got to be much more individual than a lot of people want it to be. A lot of the time it's, oh, I've got a child with autism, I've got an autistic child in my class, this is what I'm going to do. I've got this child in my class, this is what I'm going to do. You don't expect that uniformity with a child without a disability. So why do we expect children with disability to have these uniform needs when we don't expect other children to have uniform needs? It seems, counterintuitive.
That's exactly.
So.
The main part of this research was I didn't want to be the one reporting about it. I really wanted it to come from the parents, the participants themselves. We've been really lucky. I have videos that have been made by my wonderful son. Shameless plug, I know, but I will plug it anyway. And they are all available on our website, which is amazing that I even have a website. I never thought anything like that would happen. But the videos are really important because they show what the students and the participants have said themselves. It is edited, and there were some outtakes and things that they asked not to be included. But one of my favorite things is one of the parents that said that she literally says this is the first time that anyone's actually asked him what he wants. And it's been such a pleasure to be part of that journey for her.
I just think from the point of view of a neurodivergent parent who has been navigating this world only for about 18 months and trying to advocate for my son, this has been fascinating because this is our second year of trying to accommodate him at school. And I feel like possibly the first time somebody's asked him what he wants. And I think that's really important. And I even as a parent who's been on the Ross Green training, who very much tries to collaborate with him and outside of school, ask him what he wants. He came up with suggestions today that I didn't even realise there were things that were an issue for him, because the child we see at home is very different to what we see at school. So I think it's great what you're doing.
So on the Volume website, so the program, I've actually called it Volume, which stands for Voice, Opportunity, Learning, making sure I spell it right, Understanding, Movement, and Education. I had to add movement into the title because movement was the top choice. So that was important to me. So the Volume website is free for anyone to access. The activities, the research activities are on there with an explanation on how to do them, all for free. You can hire some of the equipment that I've used. Obviously, I've got it here. So if you want to have a go, you're most welcome to hire it or contact me up. I'm happy to show you how to do them. And the videos are there for anyone to view. And you can see the children saying the results for themselves, and you can see them participating. And one of the best things I want to point out is that the children actually enjoyed doing the research. We weren't making them do anything. They could volunteer. So you'll see that in the videos that they actually said, oh, this was fun. So that was the idea. It wasn't meant to be another horrible task that they had to do. This was meant to be meeting the children where they're at and letting them enjoy doing the research and having a say.